Good evening, everyone. This is Jeanette Martin, the owner of MYBC Consulting, which stands for Move Your Bum Chum Consulting. And it is Tuesday night. We're a couple of hours early, and that's for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm excited tonight that I will be at the Fraser Valley Event Planning Association for our first in-person event, and I get to present. And number two, my guest is coming to me, I believe, from about a 3-hour ahead of me time zone. And this works much better for him as well. So without further ado, it's time for the MYBC Virtual Bookstore Author Series, where I get to chat with authors, all things books. And I'm excited to welcome Brian K Wright tonight. How are you tonight, Brian?
I'm fantastic, Jeanette. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I want to do a little shout out. I think it was Lachelle Akins that connected us. Was it not? Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
She is the master connector extraordinaire for all things books as well as media. So let's first of all, tell us a little bio about yourself. Brian, once upon a time, fill in the blank.
Gosh, I've always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that would look like. In fact, when I was in school, I would write stories during study hall, and sometimes during church when I would get too fidgety, my mom would hand me a little notebook and I would just start writing stories. So I've always been a writer. I realized after a while that fiction was not my sandbox. I tried in high school, I tried writing a time travel novel, and I wrote myself into a corner, didn't know how to get out of it, so I stopped. And in college, I was in a creative writing class, writing short stories, and I found that my ideas were way too big for short stories. I wrote a story hypothesizing what would happen if someone stowed away a Noah's Ark. The instructor didn't like that idea because I think he was an atheist. I didn't know this until after he gave me my grade.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you have something there. You definitely, there is a story there, whether it's utilizing that analogy even for a nonfiction book. What happens if you stow away in somebody's business?
In fact, I had another idea for a book, and you or your audience may feel free to steal this idea because I will never do anything with it.
Okay.
But I used to work in a call center way back when. Imagine, and you know how sometimes people get really snooty about getting called on the phone. Imagine that you called someone who got so bent out of shape about it that they decided to track down where you worked and travel to where you worked and then hold your entire company hostage. That was the basis of a novel that I thought about writing, but I knew that would involve police and FBI expertise, and I didn't want to do that research. And I didn't know anyone personally who knew all of that stuff. And so I abandoned that idea. But if you wanted to write about a hostage situation in a boiler room or in a call center, have at it. I will not come after you. I don't care. I won't be doing anything with it.
You want to know something funny, Brian? We have that in common. When I was 18 years old, I worked in a carpet cleaning call center. And I think I lasted about 3 months. And my exit on that particular job, oh my gosh, there is something there, I gotta tell you, is I used to get all the time people, of course, hanging up and why are you calling me? And, now we get robots to do it. And it's just as annoying. But this one guy said, I'll have my carpets clean when hell freezes over. Now F off. And I'm editing that, and I never forget that either I could have made that situation really horrible for an 18-year-old learning how to, have a career or business, but I put the phone down and I shouted to the room. I said, hey, everybody, can you let me know when hell freezes over? I got to call this guy back so he can get his carpets cleaned. So there, I've got a tiny chapter in that story. That's an amazing storyline. So there you go. I have 1,700 followers on my Facebook page, Brian. You never know that that storyline could come up.
Someone may feel perfectly free to run with it because I don't have any interest in doing that story right now or ever.
Okay, there you go. Pick it up, somebody, and maybe reach out to Brian to, help him write. So it looks like by your website, Brian, you wear a couple of 3 different hats, I would say. Yeah. So let's talk about the 3 different avenues of Brian when it comes to being your business.
Okay. Well, it really started when I began hosting my own radio show. It's on every Monday at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific. So I'm here in Arizona, so I get to do my show at 3 o'clock in the middle of the afternoon. So that's awesome. and I get to interview amazing people on my show. It's a personal development and business success type of show. So basically, I dive into the journeys of people who are world-class achievers and learn what they did and what they overcame and the lessons we can learn from them, so that hopefully we don't make the same mistakes they did. And then I talk to them about their area of expertise for part of the show too.
Wow. Okay. So that's one hat. So that's how it started.
Yep.
How do you go from listening to words on paper?
Well, I used to teach English and speech in a college environment back in, gosh, it was in the late 1990s or early to mid 1990s, excuse me, 91 to 95. And I taught at a 2-year business school in Lincoln, Nebraska, called Lincoln School of Commerce. They're no longer open for business. But I had written a student leadership book in 2009. And based on the idea that I taught people how to do English composition and the fact that I wrote my own book, I thought, well, I can help people and coach people to write their own books. So ghostwriting and book writing coaching is another avenue of what I do. In fact, I'm working on a couple books right now. One is very close to being done, and the other one I'm going to be close to being done with here in the next week or two. So I'm going to be wrapping up 2 in very short order, which is really awesome, which leaves room for one more because I've got a guy who has said he wants to start working with me and he just needs to pay me, and he'll be doing that very shortly, and we'll be starting that one in July. So I'm very happy and excited about helping people get their message out to the world, whether it's on my show, whether it's ghostwriting, or the third thing I do, which is publishing a magazine. It's called Success Profiles Magazine. It's an offshoot of my radio show. I realized I had so much content from my radio show that I had not repurposed, and what a shame that was. And so the person who's on the cover is someone who's been on my show, and I curate part of my radio show interview into a feature article for the magazine, and then I invite collaborators to contribute articles. And so I've been doing that every month since December of 2017, and Kevin Harrington was my first cover.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is there a digital version to this?
Yes, it is digital, and I do sometimes print them out for networking purposes, but it is a digital magazine. And go to successprofilesmagazine.com. It is a subscription. So $1 for 7 days as a trial, and then pick your subscription option that you want. And you can read any issue going all the way back to December 2017. So there's 43 issues now, plus all the special edition issues that I do for private clients who want to pay to have their own branded version of Success Profiles Magazine to promote what they're doing. So yeah, I do stay busy, and it's really fun to help people get their message out to the world. It's fun to hear people using those magazines to get radio interviews, to get on stage. I, for example, when I go to networking events, if someone says, "Oh, I would love to stay in touch with you, can I have your card?" Well, here's my magazine. No one does this, right? So if someone receives a magazine instead of, or in addition to, a business card, it's another level. So I do that, and I love it. It's fun. It keeps me busy. And some of my people have worked with me on more than one project, and some people refer business to me, which is always a great idea.
Okay, so I've got about 3 things that I want to unpack in our time together.
Sure.
I think that's fancy talk for when you're interviewing somebody. Is unpack. Is, first of all, when you say ghostwriting for somebody else or with a project, what does that mean? Because I'm thinking that could be a stumbling block for somebody. That could be a solution for somebody. What does
basically
that
that
mean?
means that I interview you and I write your book for you.
Oh.
Yeah. Some people don't have time. Some people don't think they're good writers. Some people don't think they have enough to say. You think about anyone really famous, like a politician or an athlete or an entertainer. Excuse me, my nose itches. I don't know why. They don't always have time to do this.
Right.
In fact, think what you will of Trump, but when he wrote Art of the Deal back in the 80s, this is pre-computer, pre-internet. He had his assistant sit in the back of the limo with him. He would talk out loud what he wanted to say, and she would shorthand on a notepad everything he said. Then she would type it out and show it to him and say, "What do you think?" And he would say, change this, I like this, I like that. And it became a book. So people who are that busy don't have time. So someone like myself who will do it for you can be very, very valuable. And so what we do is we have a session to figure out what your book's gonna be about.
Right.
And we strategize what the chapters and the stories might be, and we figure out what your outline's going to be, and then we do a series of recorded interviews where we just data dump, and you tell me everything. I interview you, and you tell me everything you can think of, and then that's the skeleton of what I have to work with.
So sorry, I get into fascination mode with people, and I start thinking in my head on different topics or people I'd love to refer you to.
Yeah.
So what are some of your clients in the past? Do you have like a client you like to work with this process?
Usually entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs, because they have a message and they have a reason for writing the book. I mean, not that anyone else doesn't, but I want to help people leverage a book to build their business.
Okay.
So it's not just how many books can you sell, it's what can you do with the book once the book is written. You can use the book as a basis to get on someone's stage. You can use the book as a basis to be interviewed by somebody like this. Right. You can use the book as a basis to create a coaching program. You can use the content of that book to create a mastermind program. You can use the content of your area of expertise to do exotic retreats in different places in the country or in the world or wherever you are. But you can use your book in any number of ways. In fact, Robert Kiyosaki, when he wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he very liberally sprinkled the idea that he has a game called cash flow that he wants you to buy and play. So you bought his book, you got a ton of value, but there was an undercurrent that he wants you to buy something else after. And I work with people who have that offer after that.
Oh, fascinating. Okay, so that's unpacking that. So unpacking yourself as a writer, how do you balance taking other people and being their words, their voice, their story, and then Brian puts on his own hat to write 4 books? How do you accomplish that?
Well, I did a couple of my books first. And then with the other 2 books in particular, what I did is I repurposed content from my radio show. So for example, here's one of them, Success Profiles, Conversations with High Achievers. These are interviews from my radio show that I had transcribed and edited, and I compiled it. And Kevin Harrington and Tom Ziegler and Laura Langmeyer and Darren Hardy and Sharon Lechter, they were all in this book. There's also volume 2. So I did the same thing with this one in 2019, Kevin Harrington, Chris Powell, Dan Locke, Brad Sugars, so many more people, but these are people that I interviewed on my show. And so that's one thing you can do. I was inspired to do that by someone else who did the same thing probably 15 or 20 years ago. And that book was called Conversations with Millionaires.
I've heard of that book.
Yeah. Mike Littman and Jason Oman. Jason Oman's a friend of mine. I've interviewed him before.
Fascinating approach. Okay, and then you've got another book with student leadership.
Student leadership.
That one fascinates me because I think it's timely for, there's so many students that have come out from a very weird year and a half of their life and how they're going to go forward. So who is the reader of that particular book that needs to read that book?
I would say probably high school students and college students.
Okay.
Young adults. I wrote it with the end reader in mind being someone who's in school.
Okay.
And what I did when I wrote that book is I wanted to write about student leadership. It's called Student Leadership Strategies, 21 Easy Ways to Become a Center of Influence in Your Group. So I took a legal pad, sat out on my patio one Sunday morning and asked myself, what makes an excellent leader? And my goal was to come up with at least 21 answers to that question. I came up with 30, but as I began writing, those 30 merged into 21 because some of them were really similar. So each answer to that question became a short chapter.
Fascinating. There's lots of good stuff here. My followers that are on my page right now. And if you have any questions for Brian, put them into the comments. I choose not to moderate comments, Brian, because I like to stay present for people that I chat with. Cool. So if anybody is watching or watching this afterwards, I know Brian will come back and take a look at the comments on my Facebook page. Wow, there's just so much. You have such a beautiful holistic approach to books and honoring books and making sure that people get their stories out there right now. My next question is, so the coaching process of, is it describe that to me, because in my head, I have one idea of what a coach is.
Yeah.
So what does a coach in the process of writing a book look like, where I want to be a control freak throughout the whole process? What does that look like with you and your client, or the person that
when I coach clients, I get an idea for what they want their book to be about. I guide them. I ask them questions which will lead them to a conclusion that hopefully they draw for themselves. I am their accountability partner. Yeah. In fact, I had a client a couple years ago who we did our 8 sessions. And after the first 5 sessions, he and his partner went on a cruise to Japan. He says, we're going to Japan, so I need to take like 3 weeks off of this process. Okay, great. Not a problem. I said, make sure you outline your chapters before you leave. He's like, why? I said, because the chapters you outline in advance will write themselves. The ones that you don't outline in advance will be infinitely more difficult for you to write. He came back from his cruise. We had our next session. He says, you were right. I said, about what? That thing you said. Okay, just checking. He said the chapters that I outlined first were a lot easier to write. And his book evolved into really more of a movement. So and basically about being unapologetic, or just owning who you are without regard for what anyone thinks.
Right.
Because we all get beat up by people who seem to think that we should be a certain way or a certain type of person, or you should say this and you shouldn't say that. No, forget all that. Be who you are, be authentic, be unapologetic. And so that's what his book was about.
Oh, okay. I'm going to dig. Afterwards, I'm going to find out what that book is, because it's definitely, as you can see, guys, I'm in my kitchen, I have no fancy background.
Yeah.
Unapologetic, because this is where I'm going to be in order to meet people like Brian, and meet these incredible authors. So Brian, what's up and coming for you? What's on the horizon?
Well, I do want to do volume 3 of this sometime in the next maybe 6 to 12 months. I also would like to do a collaboration book centered around the ideas of the best lessons I learned from my dad.
Ooh.
And the reason being that my dad passed in February. And I reflect on some of the things that I learned from him. And I thought certainly other people have learned from their dads also. And I just want to honor other people by including them and letting them tell their stories of what they learned from their dads too. So that's something that I want to do sometime later this year, in the second half of this year.
Can I share with you what my dad taught me?
Yeah.
Well, back, I think it was about 8 or 9, and I had learned, my dad had taught me, great grammar. My dad had taught me how to make pancakes from the mix, but adding water.
Yeah.
And it was Sunday morning, and I'm going to surprise the family. I'm from a blended family of lots of kids. And I'm like, I'm going to surprise my family, and I'm going to make pancakes. It's like, I know how to do it. Dad has taught me how to do it. So I am downstairs, I'm on the stove, and they kept burning. Oh. They kept burning, and my dad could smell. You know, the parents were far enough away, and I'm like, Dad, the pancakes keep burning. And he shouted back. He says, "What have you got the stove turned on?" And I had it turned on at 7. You know how the dial, 1 to 0 at 7. My dad shouted back to me, "Pancakes burn on 7." So the lesson being, adjust. If that's the result, that pancakes keep burning on 7, turn it down to 6, turn it down to 5, turn it down to 4, adjust to make the outcome the way you want it, or else things will still keep burning.
Yeah, I learned a similar lesson when I moved to Arizona. I was cooking one of those frozen pizzas, those Totino's thin pizzas, and the directions on the box said to cook it in the oven for 11 minutes or whatever. I found out the cooking times in Arizona are not applicable to what's on the box because it's not humid here. Oh. I burned the first pizza at 11 minutes, and so I decided I better see what it looks like at 6 minutes, at 7 minutes, and at 8. I think 7 to 8 minutes was the sweet spot. So that's what I did. I've learned to ratchet down whatever it says on the box a little bit.
Adjust.
Yeah.
Throughout my life, I'd get into a tough situation, and it's like, oh, pancakes burn on 7.
Yeah.
Pancakes burn on 7. So please reach out to me, because my dad taught me a lot of things. And the biggest lesson he taught me, and why you're in my life and a lot of other authors in my life and everybody that's in my life, is the world is bigger than beyond your nose.
Yeah.
And that was I have a sense of wanderlust. I have a big sense of curiosity. And I thank you. I'm just, there's so much that I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and I want to respect your time as well. So I leave the last word to you. So what does it mean to be an author and share your story?
It's really liberating, because every time I finish one of my own books and I hold it in my hand for the first time, it's like my baby. It's an emotional experience. It's like, oh, this is new. And they're like my children, because I have to nurture them and I have to keep promoting them. I have to keep selling them. And so it's interesting. I mean, I did this with Morgan James Publishing. I still have a whole bunch of copies of this one in my office, but it's all good. In fact, somebody that I was on a podcast with last week wants to buy a half a box of books, and I might be meeting her tomorrow. So she might be buying some books from me tomorrow in person. That'll be fun.
Excellent. So once again, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time today. My condolences for losing your dad back in February.
Yeah.
I lost my dad in 2016. He's with me all the time.
Yeah.
Channeling him, because my dad was all about telling a great joke and telling story, that life is built one story at a time. So thank you, everybody. Tune in next Tuesday night. I've got a local person from Whistler, British Columbia, that's going to be sharing her story on why she became an author and why books mean so much to her as well. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you next week.